I grew up in the 1960s. We had one television in the living room, and when there was a black face on television, people would literally run out of bedrooms to the living room to see what was going on, and unfortunately, they were often fleeting images.
We just wanted fairness and equality, and that's what we fought for, and that's where United Church of Christ was a godsend.
The Office of Communications really defined what the public interest means in broadcasting with the WLBT case over 30 years ago now.
You really have to go back to the 50s and 60s to understand the importance of this case. There were 2 television stations in Jackson and 2 newspapers. The newspapers were absolutely dreadful, while the TV stations weren't that much better.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
Martin King came along and was so heavily supported by the Board for Homeland Ministries, and he talked to us about how they were being treated in the South on the stations, and I went down and went from town to town and watched, and we decided we had to do something.
This was a period of time when the Civil Rights Movement was getting underway and was getting national attention.
Thurgood Marshall or Martin Luther King might have been on national news, and you could recognize that's Thurgood Marshall, and suddenly there would be cable trouble. The Citizens Council at one point had congratulated this station for deleting national civil rights news, in other words, censoring it.
We found that there was such a terrible situation in Jackson, Mississippi with WLBT. It had a KKK bookstore on the property, and it discriminated terribly against blacks. It was the NBC outlet. It's the most powerful station in the Mid-South.
I'm glad that the United Church of Christ did choose WLBT, but I think that it will always be a significant case because it reflected some things that were not only going on here in Jackson, but the attitude in the South generally.
They had a children's program, and we asked the NAB to send a letter to all broadcasters asking that romper room should be integrated. If they had sent that letter, I probably wouldn't have gone any farther.
In 1964, Dr. Parker arranged a team to monitor the TV stations to see exactly what they were doing.
We had the monitoring study, and we then presented it to the FCC and asked that they hold a hearing. And then they sent a letter saying that we did not have standing. At that point, we sued the FCC.
I think Dr. Parker was a very courageous man to do what he did. It took tremendous courage in those days to come in and put together the kind of research effort it took to challenge this license here. And you really were endangered coming down here doing it. You were taking your life in your hands, literally. He could have been murdered for what he did, just like Medgar Evers was murdered for what he did, trying to register people to vote.
When the license challenge, the petition to deny was filed, nobody gave the church a chance to win. This was a classic David and Goliath fight, and like the story in the Bible, David won.
One of the first things that happened after the lawsuit was over was the Romper Room show was integrated. This was no small event in Jackson, Mississippi in 1971.
At the end of the 10-year fight for this permanent license, a majority black-owned group was formed that got the permanent license. And Aaron Henry, who had once been denied airtime on this station because he was black, became chairman of the board.
You know, I think the United Church of Christ's Office of Communications stepping into the WLBT case was probably one of the most instrumental things that have happened in the broadcast industry, because it made all broadcasters, not just here in Jackson, not just WLBT, it made them all realize you do have a public responsibility.
when they realized that you could take the license away from a TV station, when you realized that that great economic power could be lost because of the way you're treating black people, then it really had an impact. Things really started to change when it hit the pocketbook, and people got the realization that we can't continue doing this. We've got to change our ways.
Together, our two organizations, TRAC and UCC OC Inc., are delighted to welcome you to this, the 25th annual Everett C. Parker Lecture and Awards Luncheon.
The Parker Lecture was created in 1983 in order to honor the pioneering work of the Reverend Everett C. Parker and to create a space where telecommunications executives and religious leaders and those who are interested in the media could come together and find common ground and understanding around complex telecommunications issues.
I've always been grateful for the fact that the directors of the Office of Communication, before I retired, set up this lectureship, and in the true spirit of doing things in the church, they mandated that there should be an annual lecture. They didn't put a penny down on the line to pay for it.
Reverend Parker is one of my heroes. It's a remarkable story of someone who was obviously fairly early in his career touched by the need to better his world, better his community, and inspired to do good.
I think the most important thing that I have done in my whole life is getting the EEO rules and starting the Foundation for Minority Interests in Media, which has put hundreds of minority kids, boys and girls, into the broadcasting and cable industries.
I never dreamed of being in broadcasting. I had many dreams. But as I look back on it, those dreams were all inspired by what I saw. Most children think they can do something because they see someone doing it and they think they can be that person. There were dreams, but no dreams of broadcasting. Not any. But for Reverend Parker and people who were involved with the civil rights movement who knew that the airwaves were the property of the public and that they should serve all of the public regardless of race, color, creed, or station. Reverend Parker, thank you, sir.
Before the very high standard that he set in public advocacy, there was nobody working on this kind of scale. And all who came after him must owe Dr. Parker and the tremendous standard of accomplishment and integrity that he set a great debt of gratitude.
His influence has continued through the years. Members of the Federal Communication Commission look to him for guidance and experience on how to proceed. And when he has a problem and he makes it known to federal regulators, they listen.
To anyone watching or seeing this, I would want to say that Everett Parker was a shining light of enlightenment in the broadcast industry. And I would hope that everyone who operates any kind of a broadcast medium, cable, whatever, would take a look at Dr. Parker's life and the things he accomplished, the things he tried to do, the things he truly believed in, and hopefully try to follow in his footsteps in some manner.